You guys are always asking me what kind of paint you can use inside of an airbrush and how to thin it out. The short answer is you can use anything. However, the quality is going to vary, so let's talk about how each of them perform. There is one disclaimer I need to give at the beginning of this video, which is that my last airbrush got so dirty and laziness kicked in and I just didn't want to clean it, so instead I bought a new one. But with that said, this is my first time using this airbrush specifically, so I did have a slight learning curve getting started. One last side tangent, I do have a lot of thoughts on this airbrush versus the cordless handheld one that I've previously used, so if you're curious about that comparison video, let me know. Anyway, I started out with the actual airbrush paint here. This one is pre-mixed and I will not be adding any additional thinner to it. I would say you want your paint consistency to be around Yahoo chocolate milk. Not too watery, but also thin enough that it still runs. Anyway, this is actually my first time using real airbrush paint, and right off the bat, I was pretty impressed. Throughout the video, you'll notice me making adjustments to my pressure and flow. My baseline was 25 psi, and that worked really well for this airbrush paint. The results were very smooth and gave me a lot of control. I could very easily get thin clean lines, as well as thick blended one. Next up, I moved on to Army speed paints, and before you're like, they're not meant for this. Listen, you don't know until you try, okay, David? Sorry, I have nothing personal against David specifically. Anyway, as suspected, this one was much more sheer. Additionally, because Army speed paints are very watery, I was having trouble getting my pressure down low enough to not get these big drippy areas. Considering the cost of speed paints and the results that I was getting, I just don't really think that I would recommend this as an option, but at least we tried. The remainder of my attempts will be cheap craft store acrylic paint mixed with various different thinning mediums. One thing to note here is there is an additional variable in the fact that you have to mix these paints up to get the right consistency, so the results may vary if the paint is mixed to be thinner or thicker. Additionally, I do think that the quality and the pigment of the paint that you use will have an impact on this. First up, I tried rubbing alcohol, and I really struggled to get my pressure right on this one. My lines were very speckly, which tells me that the pressure was too low. However, if I turned it up, I ended up getting pooling, and I just couldn't really find a sweet spot to get those super smooth lines. From here, I tried mixing my acrylics with actual airbrush thinner. Right off the bat, I don't love this solution because whereas a bottle of rubbing alcohol that's about 3 times the size will cost you about $1, I believe this bottle of airbrush thinner was $11. So it's not the most affordable option. I will say I got better results than I did with the rubbing alcohol. However, it still took me quite a bit of finagling to get the pressure adjusted just right, and even still, my lines just weren't as smooth as they were with the actual airbrush paint. Last but certainly not least, I mixed my acrylics with just straight water, which of course is the most affordable option. Overall, I would say it gave me decent control. However, even if I didn't tell you which option was which, when you look at this option compared to the other ones, it almost looks like watercolor paint. It's very airy, it's more sheer. I was having a little bit of an issue with pooling at some points. However, unlike the other two options, I had no issues with speckling. In the end, if I had to rate these, in last place would be rubbing alcohol. It was just way too speckly. Next up was Army paints. It was very thin and watery. However, it was smoother. Next up was airbrush thinner. This one was decent, and I think with some more practice I could get it down, but it is expensive. In second place, we have water. It's affordable, accessible, and it came out decent. Unsurprisingly, in first place, the actual airbrush paint was number 1. It was by far the smoothest and gave me the most control. But with all that said, what should we try putting inside of our airbrush next?